myself, because my mom was so young having me. And then my parents got married and then they got divorced and I was 3. And I ended up living with my grandparents, so granny and grandpa. But by that time, everybody else was starting to like roll out of the house when I can
Mm-hmm.
kind of remember those things. So then I was by myself. So I didn't see those things, as much.
Yeah, yeah.
But, it was fine. All of the older
I think
kids were a little bit rough
yeah,
on me sometimes. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, you were teased. I remember you being
Yeah.
teased a lot, and you had to develop a thick skin,
Hmm.
um, but that's like the rite of passage, right? Like that's what older cousins get to do that.
Yeah, and
So
I never saw it that way until I was much older. But, like my aunts especially were so hard on me. And it was just because we were so close in age, right? But
yeah.
they used to do all sorts of stuff to me, and I feel like I was traumatized by it, and I oftentimes bug them
To go to
about it because it was not cool. Like they would
yeah,
snort my
you had to go to
nose.
therapy.
Yeah, pretty much.
Get some
Yeah.
help.
Well, they would
Yeah,
snort my
and
nose and
that's like
do all sorts of weird stuff.
that's like a family. Yeah, like that's family dynamics, or there's different pockets of people that tease and got teased, and it's just
Yeah.
I'm sure just the way it is in so many situations.
Well, and I think our
And I think back
family
to like
was comfortable that way. It was like
yeah,
love.
it was, I think, in some ways, but I'm not going to name names, but as we grew into adulthood and like I'm pretty close to some of our cousins, right? Like have some really good friendships with some of our cousins, and we've had really serious and really great discussions about the sarcasm, the family
Yes.
dynamic of sarcasm, and the almost like kind of cutting down or bitey, and it's never meant to be hurtful.
No.
It's not meant to be that way, but it's like you get in the habit of being kind of sarcastic, or like the old jokes, right?
Yeah.
The old jokes that keep coming back around, like the terrible thing you did when you were 14 to somebody else,
Yeah.
but nobody can let it go, or like the time you screwed up and nobody will forget it and they'll always remind you of
Yeah.
it. And it was actually super healing in many ways to talk about that in detail. And it wasn't that I had an issue with this other cousin or anything. It wasn't like that.
Yeah.
It was actually more of us both noticing that it was something we were doing with each other, and then it really got highlighted when we were all together as a group. Like when more cousins were together, you could see this common thread
Uh-huh.
of this like sharp and not funny, but this sharp kind of edgy, and we decided just very intentionally to stop doing that,
Mhm.
between each other for sure, but to try to change that pattern. And we both noticed it was really difficult to change it
Mhm.
too.
Oh yeah. Like
Yeah,
I mean
you know exactly what I
I
mean.
do because
Yeah.
I do it all the time, but I don't feel I need to change it. So,
Well, I think there's a funny line. Like I don't think being
no.
sarcastic is bad at all, but it was kind of getting to the point, and we noticed it, where it was hurtful.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't really meant to be that way
Yeah.
with certain people, but it was that
Mhm.
way.
Yeah, I think
So
I can see that. I know like you just get used to doing it so you don't see it being hurtful because we all do it. But, you
yeah.
know, um I definitely do it all the time and I see like my kids do it but they're not hurtful. Like my kids I've noticed. But I don't know. I think it's just we grew up that way. Everybody was like that and it
Yeah.
just sort of
Yeah.
spilled over. But, for me, I think that there is well, I mean, not so much now, but I think when I was a teenager that there was trauma there for the way some people handled the teasing and you know,
Mm.
like we lived in this old farmhouse and our basement had a dirt floor. It had these cutouts in the walls that to me, led to the abyss of nothing. It was just black.
Mm.
And, we had stairs that had no back on them. And Granny Carol would put all the preserves downstairs, but you would have to go down the stairs and around it and past one of these holes. And my aunts told me that Dracula lived in there. Well,
Oh my gosh.
I kid. Who wants to go
Mm.
downstairs to get anything? And Granny Carol would send me down, go get jam, go get jam. And I'd grab my cat
Oh
and I'd
no.
go down those stairs. I'd grab that
The
jam
sacrifice to
and I'd huck my
Dracula.
cat. I would leave
Oh
him for
no.
dead and I would run up those stairs without touching a step. And I would get up there. And
Oh no.
never did I like going down there. But,
Oh my gosh.
and I'm 43 years old. I hate going in my basement now. If the light gets turned off, I'm like, get up the stairs, because who's
Like,
behind me?
I never saw
Yeah.
Ricki move so fast.
I know. I'm like an Olympic athlete jumping the
It's like-
stairs. Yeah. No.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know if they did stuff like that to you.
Sure. I mean, not in the same way, I don't think, but yeah. And again, I was kind of a timid little kid. So I think I probably didn't get it as bad as other people who could kind of take it because I was a nervous kind of kid in some ways anyway. So I'm pretty sure they didn't want to scare me. Plus, my mom was kind of a force to be reckoned with. So I'm pretty sure some people might tiptoe around her if maybe be on their best behavior if they thought maybe something, although she could tease and dish out like anybody could, if not worse. So yeah. So there was this full dynamic, but I think about the the people who we've started to connect with through this podcast are these cousin relationships, these sibling family, right? It's just our family, but others as well. And I bet you anything there's so much of that happens. I'm sure we're going to hear lots of stories after this episode goes out about those family dynamics. And, as easy as it is to remember kind of the difficult because I can think of all kinds of stories that I'd love to share, but I'm not going to out my family, right? There's family things that just should say, yeah, you are. but I feel like it was just so great to there's something about our family and maybe every family feels this way to a degree. I know there's sometimes fractured relationships there always is different that happens because life is really hard, right? And families sometimes take it out on each other. That happens all the time. But I also know there's something about our family and maybe others that is so generous. I think to our grandparents, and I think not just our grannies, but our grandpas as well, and our uncles, and good human beings that were, they screwed up at times. Definitely, there were certainly issues in our family on a wider scale, but they definitely were cut from that cloth of give the shirt off your back and you help your neighbor and you make sure people are okay. And I love that, and I like how that extends. I think about my own brother and sister and some of the cousins and stuff, and the things they're doing in their life are very much about service to other people, and really that, I think that's I work with some indigenous Anishinaabe elders, and they would call that blood memory, right? You're bringing the characteristics from your ancestors forward, and I love that much.
I do too. I think it's true. We've been very fortunate that it's not just a small group of people in our family that are great. It's everybody in our family is great, and I mean, I'm extra lucky because I have it on both sides. Like my dad's side of the
I
family
thought you were
is,
gonna say you're extra great.
well, I am extra great.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. You
Yeah.
are extra great.
Well,
You are extra.
I am extra. But I'm very fortunate, like I'm a child that comes from a divorced family, and I'm not a typical child of divorce. Like I've been so fortunate my whole life. My mom's family, my dad's family, like everybody just made me feel important and loved. And you,
You were very wanted.
yeah,
Like,
and
despite the fact that your parents were young, you were very
yeah,
wanted.
and I was lucky that way, because it wasn't just the older people too. Like, I mean, my uncle, I had such a good relationship with him growing up. And, you know, I just, I never felt unwanted at all. Like, I don't think, I don't think so. I think I was very lucky that way,
Mhm.
and I could go anywhere and have a good time with anybody. So maybe that's why I never shut
Yeah.
up, because I have all these stories to tell because I'm with everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you were the
Mhm.
youngest, so you had to find your place in the room, right?
Yeah.
So you had to make your own, like, your personality always stood out.
Hmm.
And I think the easiness that people felt around you, and again, a testament to the
Yeah.
family, right? Like people are accepting and
Yeah.
everybody. I remember my dad like kind of slinging you around and, just yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
And
think,
everybody liked kids,
yeah,
in our family.
I lucked out that way. Like, and I think that that's maybe why I'm sure of myself, and not in a bad way, but I'm very comfortable with who I am. And I think that that's sort of why, because I always belonged. I always felt wanted, and,
Yeah.
everything I did was special and amazing. And,
Yeah.
like Granny Carol always
And I
said, she could
think
have had a million of me because I was so perfect.
yeah. Aw. And I think, the time that I had with Granny Rosella and I can say that, it wasn't always easy. Growing up wasn't always easy. But Granny and Grandpa's place and their kind of nature, and more Granny than Grandpa because I was closer to
Hmm.
Granny, just knew her better,
Yeah.
right? Um but definitely I always felt like I
Mhm.
belonged. I always felt like I belonged,
Yeah.
and that I think that's such a special relationship, and I think, you know, it is a big part of even just why we want to do
Yeah.
this because we want to help other people feel like they belong.
Yeah.
And I think having a place, whether, if you don't have cousins and you don't have that kind of relationship, we'll be that.
Yeah.
We'll be that
Absolutely.
for you, your family.
Yep.
And I don't know. I just love that. And I think that that's part of what the 80s did because the 80s were unplugged.
Mm.
The 80s were not us sitting in front of a
No.
camera or listening to podcasts or it wasn't any of that.
No.
You had your little cassette tape that maybe your family was super rich and you had a Walkman, that'd be
Right?
amazing. But it wasn't like that for everybody. You were outside, you were playing with your family, your friends,
Well,
whatever.
you had to. You had
And
to
I
build
think,
those
yeah,
connections,
yeah.
because otherwise you'd be
And I
alone.
think that's right. You'd be by yourself. And I think that's where we just kind of learned to be able to go deeper with
Mhm.
people, and build that confidence.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, we learned a lot of confidence when you're out kind of doing your own thing.
Yeah.
And it's something I think that I've taken in to my like future,
Mhm.
from then.
I think so.
But
Yeah. I like, well, even too, like I can see like it shine in your work. I can see that the care and all of that shines throughout your work.
I think there's a work ethic
Mhm.
that we learned, because I don't know what everybody does in our extended family, but I know just the people that I'm closer to, everybody cares a lot about not just what they do, but they all serve people in some way,
Yeah.
whether they're nurses or artists or, you know, they're all just kind of caring for people and working hard in the space they're in. And I think those examples just, I don't know, it's a connection.
Mhm.
And I look at different pockets of the family and they're connected to each other.
Yeah.
Right? I think that wider, you know, even with this, we've all kinds of cousins that are kind of joining our Facebook
Mhm.
group, but we don't really know them. And this is such a great
Oh,
way
yeah.
to do that.
I know. I love
Yeah.
meeting more family. There's just something about it, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's a lot of care in who we are. And we get that from, you know, the people we're around. And you were around our grannies and our grandpas. Well, I know I was the most, right? Like I worked in a retirement community for 8 years. And, you know, not to toot my own horn, but a lot of them loved me. And I worked graveyard. So I very rarely saw anybody. But I had a group that would come down early for breakfast just so I could serve them. And so I built a lot of really great relationships. You know, sadly, most of them have passed away. And that's what I really don't like about that. Because, you know.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's tough.
yeah. So, yeah. And even too, like my oldest, she now works in the retirement community too. And she is loved by a lot of the residents because there's just something about her and how she is with people. So, you know, and I know a lot of like your kids are artists and, you know, they're out there interacting with people and, you know, you can see it even in their Facebook, you know, their pictures with their friends and, you know, yeah, I think
there's one story where two of my daughters have lived in Toronto for years, like years and years, and the combinations of my kids have all kind of lived together in and out of that city. And there was one situation, I'm probably not going to tell it right, but if I remember it correctly, there was one situation where there was a homeless man or an unhoused man who was sort of in one area, and both daughters walked by him on a regular basis to go to their work, but they were never together. They had different shifts, different schedules or whatever. But one of them kept, you know, would drop him off, you know, piece of cake or some food or something every once in a while. And then I don't know how they discovered this, but it turned out that they were both giving this man food and whatever.
Yeah.
But he thought they were the same person. So that, like, why they were coming 2 or 3 times a day to give him something, you know, or like, you just gave me this piece of cake and now you're here 10 minutes later, like, well, don't you have something else to be doing or something? And it was like, no, that was my sister.
Nice.
And they don't even look that much alike, you know, they kind of do, but that was very funny.
That's cute.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, my daughter, she tried to help like an unhoused woman, and sadly she was like, oh, do you need help? And the lady tried to attack her. And so Claire was like,
oh no.
So Claire was like, no, clearly you don't need help. So
you don't need me.
No.
I'm okay.
But yeah, like, and that's that caring nature, right? Like,
yeah,